Alien princess mocked his human sweat, but her body loved it. She was born from code, crowned in steel, an alien queen forged by AI and ancient prophecy. He was a human mercenary, broke, reckless, and breathing sarcasm like it was oxygen. On a planet scorched by war and silence, they were never meant to meet. She called him obsolete. He called her stuck-up circuitry. But fate had other plans. One ruined world, one forgotten key, and a bond older than the stars themselves. This is not a love story. It's a war that became one. The sky above Velas 4 burned a deep violet, like bruised silk stretched across a broken world. A dying gas giant loomed overhead, its colossal rings casting fractured shadows across the land below. Lie below, skeletal ruins sprawled across the horizon, the remnants of Teval Kai, once a majestic alien capital, now just ghost bones beneath a purple sky. A dropship descended from the upper thermosphere, its thrusters kicking up swirling plumes of silver ash and bone dust. The metallic howl of its landing echoed through the dead city. From its belly stepped a man who looked like he belonged anywhere but here. Jack's rider lit a cigarette with a flick of his thumb torch, squinting up at the ominous gas giant that loomed like a watchful god. The swirling purple sky reflected in the scratched visor of his helmet, which he pushed. Purple fucking space hell, he muttered, dragging a long inhale. Beautiful in that I'm probably gonna die here kind of way. His voice echoed hollowly across the ruined expanse. He wasn't here for sightseeing. The job was simple. On paper, escort a client through hostile terrain, recover an artifact buried beneath the ruins of Teval Kai, and don't die in the process. The pay was double his usual rate, triple if the client made it back alive, which, judging from the last 2 minutes in her presence, he seriously doubted, because his client was currently staring at him with the kind of expression one reserved for fungus growing on expensive shoes. "You're the guide?" she asked, her voice laced with elegant disdain. Jax gave her a once-over. She was tall, regal, and unnervingly still. Her skin shimmered with a faint silver glow under the fading sunlight, her eyes a luminous violet, and long strands of obsidian black hair were braided intricately down her back. She wore a long, dark cloak embroidered with alien script and carried herself like she had once ruled stars. She looked at him as if he were a barely trained animal, and maybe he was. "That's me, sweetheart," Jack said, puffing smoke from his nose. "Mercenary, survival expert, personal tour guide through hell. You can call me Jax, or Ryder, or, if we really hit it off, Daddy." Her left eyebrow twitched. "I will call you Jax, nothing more." He grinned. "Fair enough. And you are?" "Seren Alvarell, last daughter of the House of Siltherai." "Cool title," he said, already walking. "But let's hope it doesn't get you shot." They descended into the ruins in silence, broken only by the crunch of sand beneath their boots and the distant moan of wind whistling through hollowed-out towers. Jax occasionally glanced back at her, noting the way she walked, precise, fluid, alert. Not just a noble, then a trained one, maybe a warrior, maybe worse. "You ever used one of these?" he asked, tossing her a sidearm. She caught it effortlessly, checked the power cell, and holstered it without a word. "I was born during war," she said. "I've bled for my people. I've killed." Jax gave a low whistle. "Damn, and here I thought I was the dangerous one." She didn't respond. Hours passed as they navigated the sun-scorched bones of the city. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. Seren led with an uncanny sense of direction, pausing now and then to whisper alien words to herself. Prayers, maybe, or memories. Jax didn't pry. He just kept an eye on the motion scanner. Until, snap! Jax froze. So did she. He looked down. Oh, fuck me. A thin crystalline vine had curled around his ankle, Dozens more sprouted from a cracked floor tile, snaking out toward them with frightening speed. "Move!" Siren hissed, but it was too late. A long vine lashed out and stabbed him, square in the ass. "Shit!" Jax yelled, spinning and falling backward. "It stabbed my fucking ass!" Siren's eyes widened. "That is unfortunate." "Unfortunate?" he shouted, writhing as he yanked the thorn from his backside. "It's humiliating. That vine just violated me." He scrambled back to his feet, blasting at the vines with his rifle. They hissed and recoiled in the heat of plasma fire. Siren joined him, flinging a silver-bladed boomerang that sliced through the tendrils like butter. They didn't stop running until the vines had disappeared into the distance. Panting, Jax leaned against a pillar. "Okay, so rule 1, never trust alien vines, especially the kinky ones." Siren blinked at him. "Do all humans speak so graphically?" He looked at her, exasperated. "Lady, I just got impaled by a goddamn ass plant. Let me cope the way I know how." There was a pause. Then, was that a smile? The corner of her lip curved. Just barely. A moment of silence passed between them. Then she leaned slightly closer, eyes glowing faintly. "You bleed easily," she said, tilting her head. Jax raised an eyebrow. "Thanks. That's not weird at all. Your physiology, it's different. Raw, unrefined. You reek of adrenaline and salt and protein decay. It's..." He waited. "It's what?" Siren blinked again. "Oddly intoxicating." Jax stared at her. "Are you telling me you like how I smell?" She cleared her throat. "I said no such thing." He grinned. "I knew it. The noble Ice Queen likes a little musk." "I will incinerate you." "I believe you." He chuckled, falling into step beside her again. Night fell on Velisfor like a velvet shroud. The twin moons rose behind shattered towers, casting pale light over a world long dead. They set up camp inside the remnants of a once grand hall, now hollowed, burned, and wind-eaten. Jax started a fire. Siren sat nearby, wrapped in her cloak, watching him. "You don't ask many questions," she finally said. "I don't get paid to, but you are curious." "Of course," Jax admitted. "You're the last of your kind. You glow in the dark, and earlier you said my sweat smells sexy. I'm full of questions." She looked away, hiding a smile. Then, more quietly, "I wasn't always alone. The war took more than blood. It took memory, culture, identity. Everything I ever knew, burned in 1,000 fires. My people were wiped from existence. And now, here I am, walking beside a crude, foul-mouthed ape in patched armor." Jax tossed another log onto the fire. "Yeah, well," he said, "at least you're not bored." They sat in silence. Then Jax leaned back, staring at the stars through the shattered ceiling. "I've seen a lot of things," he said. "Pirate kings, ghost ships, whole moons turned inside out. But I've never seen anyone like you." Siren looked at him. "You are not what I expected," she whispered. "Likewise, princess." And for a moment, just a moment, the ruins weren't so silent anymore. The city was quiet, too quiet for a place that had once held millions. Jax's boots crunched over shattered crystal tiles as he made his way through what looked like the ruins of a ceremonial square. Statues of long-forgotten figures stood toppled or defaced, their features smooth and alien, yet hauntingly humanoid. Each one seemed to watch him with blind eyes. His comm buzzed. "Mission feed. Locate the relic. Do not engage with natives. Extract clean. No traces." He snorted. "Yeah, sure. Because everything always goes according to plan." From the edge of the square, something moved. Fast. Fluid. Jax dropped to a crouch, hand on his pulse pistol. "Show yourself," he barked. Silence. Then, a figure stepped into view. Not stealthily, not cautiously, but with the unbothered grace of someone who'd been watching him the whole time. She was tall and nearly his height, and striking in a way that made his brain short-circuit for a second. Ash-gray skin, with faint bioluminescent lines tracing down her neck like glowing veins. Her eyes were opalescent, reflecting the shattered light of the sky, and her hair, and if you could call it that, moved slightly in the air like it was underwater, and she had a blade pointed at his throat before he could blink. Jax froze. Well, hello to you too. Gorgeous. She narrowed her eyes. You are trespassing. He raised both hands, pulse pistol still in one. Define trespassing. It's hard to know where the welcome mats are on dead planets. She didn't laugh. Of course she didn't. Drop your weapon. Lady, this thing's practically part of my body. The blade kissed his neck. He sighed and let it fall with a clatter. Now remove your helmet. Oh, you're gonna regret that, he muttered, popping the seal and pulling it off. The moment the seal broke, the air filled with the musky tang of sweat, machine grease, and recycled ship air, the fine perfume of a human merc who hadn't bathed properly in 3 days. She recoiled, nostrils flaring. What? Is that stench? Jax grinned. Oh, you mean me? That's Ode to Soldier. Limited edition. She blinked rapidly, clearly trying not to gag. I can't tell if that's a weapon or a biological malfunction, she muttered. Why not both? She hissed something in her native tongue and lowered the blade, but not all the way. I should kill you. You could. Or you could admit you're at least a little curious what I'm doing here. I already know, she said coldly. You're here for the vault. Jax's smile faltered. She continued, stepping closer. You humans never learn. The vaults were sealed for a reason, and only the blood of my kind can open them. Then lucky me, Jax replied, tapping his chest. I brought a knife and a bad idea. She tilted her head, confused. That was a joke. Kind of. Look, maybe we're after the same thing. I doubt that, she said. At that moment, Jax took a step back and accidentally stumbled on a root poking through the ground. His boot twisted, and before he could stop himself, he sat hard on the ground, right on a thick, thorny alien vine. Son of a... Jax yelped, leaping back to his feet, rubbing his ass furiously. Was that spiked? The alien woman blinked. You just sat on a mating thorn. A what now? It secretes a pheromone that attracts... Never mind. Just don't touch anything else. Oh, hell no. You people have horny plants? She looked almost amused. Almost. You're more fragile than you look. And you're more smug than anyone I've ever met. And that's saying something. A silence stretched between them. The wind kicked up a low howl. For a brief moment, her eyes studied him, not with hostility, but with reluctant interest. She extended her hand, still wary. I am called Ceres, she said. Guardian of this ruin. Jax hesitated, then took her hand, a rough, calloused grip meeting her elegant fingers. Jax rider, mercenary, an occasional pain in the ass. Ceres arched an eyebrow. That much is obvious. They walked in tense silence for a while, Jax limping slightly and still rubbing his backside. This whole planet is a goddamn health hazard, he muttered. Watch your step, Ceres said, deadpan. Some of the stones here bite, Jax chuckled. You say that like you're not joking. I'm not. Of course not. They moved deeper into the ruins, down a stairwell half buried in sand and bone. It opened into a vaulted chamber, half collapsed, filled with alien glyphs glowing faintly on the walls. Somewhere deep below, a soft hum pulsed through the ground like a heartbeat. Jax slowed. You feel that? Ceres nodded. The vault, it's awake. He looked at her. I thought you said it was sealed. It is, but something, or someone, is disturbing the seal. No sooner had the words left her mouth than the air split with a harsh screech, the unmistakable sound of repulsor boots. Figures dropped in from above, 4 of them, clad in black exo-armor, helmets glowing red. "Syndicate hunters," Jax growled. "Fucking great." Saris didn't wait. She moved like lightning, her blades slicing through the air with a fluid grace that bordered on beautiful. One hunter didn't even get a shot off before his visor shattered, and he hit the ground twitching. Jax dove for cover behind a crumbled archway, pulling his pulse pistol. "Nice form, our princess." "You dance too?" "Only when I'm killing." "Hot." Blaster fire scorched the air. Jax returned fire, dropping one of the hunters with a clean headshot. Saris ducked beside him, panting slightly. "More are coming." He glanced at her. "Got any secret alien powers you're not telling me about? Do you? Other than being devilishly charming?" "No." She gave him a look. "Then we run." He grinned. "Finally, something we agree on." They bolted down a side corridor as another wave of Syndicate troops landed behind them. The old ruins shook with the impact. Alarms, ancient, crackling, alien, started to echo through the stone halls. Sarah slammed her palm on a glyph etched into a nearby wall. A hidden door opened just long enough for them to slip through before it sealed behind them. Silence. Jax leaned against the wall, catching his breath. "I'm starting to think your dead planet is very much alive." Saris didn't respond. She stood there watching him, her expression unreadable. "What? You fought? Well," she admitted, reluctant. "Thanks. I try to look good while not dying." A pause, then, "Why are you really here?" "Jax Ryder." Her voice was quieter now. He met her eyes. "I told you. Mercenary contract. Find the relic. Bring it back." "Who hired you?" He hesitated. She noticed. "Ah," Sarah said. "You don't know." He sighed. "I know enough. Credits are credits." Her eyes narrowed. "You're going to get us both killed." "Maybe. But hey, I'm fun at parties." Despite herself, Saris's mouth twitched. "Just a little." "Unbelievable," she muttered. Turning away, Jax looked around the hidden room. It was some kind of sanctuary, murals on the walls, depicting ancient figures with glowing eyes and outstretched hands. "Is this religious?" "Cultural," she said, her tone sharp. "This is the memory room. Every guardian is brought here when they come of age." Jax stepped closer to a panel glowing with soft blue light. "Can I touch?" "No." He touched it anyway. The panel pulsed, and holographic projections flickered to life, swirling around them. Ghosts of the past. A figure with Saris's face, younger, uncertain, standing before a crowd. Another of her bowing before a dying elder. Saris froze. Jax looked at her. "That's you." She didn't reply. He stepped closer, voice softer now. "You're more than just some blade-wielding badass, huh?" "I was a symbol," she said quietly. "Once." Jax studied her. "What happened?" She looked up at him, something raw in her gaze. "They all died, and I became obsolete." Silence. Then Jax, very gently. "Yeah, I know how that feels." The room trembled again, a low, ominous growl through the walls. Saris turned to him, eyes serious now. "If we don't reach the vault first, the Syndicate will strip it and release what's locked inside." "Let me guess," Jack said. "It's not treasure. It's war." The hidden passage led them into a corridor unlike the rest. Smoother walls, lined with alien tech that still pulsed with weak light. The air was colder here, tinged with a sharp, sterile bite. "Security sector," Saris muttered. "We're getting close." Jack slowed, noticing a flicker from the corner of his eye. He stepped closer to a panel etched with softly glowing runes. "What's this do?" "Don't touch!" He touched. The floor opened beneath him. "Shit!" He dropped 5 feet into a pit filled with semi-gelatinous muck that reeked like battery acid and burnt mushrooms. Saris leaned over the edge, completely unimpressed. Didn't I say not to touch anything? Didn't I say I'm great at improvising? He coughed, wiping goop off his face. This better not be alien sewage. Actually, don't finish that. With a sigh, Saris activated a lift plate to bring him up. As Jack stepped out, dripping and cursing under his breath, she handed him a small cloth. It won't help. He wiped anyway. The next chamber was wide and dark, lit only by an eerie blue glow coming from the far wall. There, embedded into the stone, was a door, not just carved, but alive. It breathed. Jack stared. Okay, that's new. The vault, Saris confirmed. And it's sealed with a living lock. Neat. How do we unlock it? A password? Magic kiss? Saris gave him a flat look. It responds to blood. Jax blinked. Please tell me you mean metaphorically. I don't. Of course not. Before they could argue about who bleeds first, the wall behind them shuddered with impact. A split second later, the explosion hit. The blast threw them forward. Dust and debris rained down. Jax rolled, coughing. They're here. Through the settling dust came the syndicate hunters. More of them. This time, heavy armor, no words, just weapons. Jax dove behind a half-fallen pillar, returning fire. This just keeps getting better. Saris was already moving, a blur of precision and fire. She fought like she was born in war. Jax watched her for a moment, a blade of grace and fury in motion. Then he got shot in the arm. Fuck! He ducked down, clutching his shoulder. The hit hadn't gone through the armor, but it hurt like hell. Saris dragged him behind cover. Stay down. Thanks, Mom, he grunted. We're not going to win this, she said, checking the energy levels of her weapon. Too many. You always this cheerful? Then she did something he didn't expect. She pulled out a small vial, uncapped it, and dragged the blade across her palm. The door across the chamber pulsed. Saris turned to him. You want to live, Ryder? He grinned, blood on his teeth. Define living. She grabbed his uninjured hand, and before he could say anything, cut his palm too. Fuck! The lock responded. A hiss. The door split open, slow and groaning like an ancient beast waking from slumber. Inside, darkness, flickering lights, and something waiting. No time, Saris said, dragging him in just as another barrage of gunfire rattled the stones around them. The door sealed behind them, silencing the chaos outside. They slumped against the inner wall, breathing hard. You're insane, Jax said, still gripping his bleeding hand. So are you, Saris replied. You followed me in. A beat, then he chuckled. You did hold my hand. Technically, that's a first date on some planets. Saris stared at him. Then, to his absolute shock, she cracked a smile. Just a small one. The chamber was massive, lined with ancient machinery and symbols neither of them could read. At the center, a pedestal with a crystalline orb glowing faintly blue. Saris approached it slowly. This is what they're after. Jax looked up from wrapping his hand. What is it? I don't know, but my ancestors died to protect it. He stood beside her. So, what now? Saris looked at him. Now we find out why you were really sent here, and we pray it doesn't kill us first. The world snapped back into focus with a jolt. Jax gasped, hitting the ground on hands and knees. He blinked at the alien terrain around him. Warped trees with translucent bark. A violet sky streaked with thin ribbons of pale green lightning. The air smelled like ozone and cold stone. Next to him, Saris groaned. Her shoulder was scorched from the blast during their escape. Damn it! Where the hell are we? No clue, Jax muttered, pushing himself upright. But it smells like bad decisions and ionized death. The teleportation portal had spat them out in a different region of the planet, one untouched by the Syndicate War, yet somehow even more ominous. Saris scanned the landscape. We're near the Dead Ridge. This is a no-go zone. Even my people avoid it. Jax raised an eyebrow. Any particular reason, or is it just alien superstition? She didn't answer right away. There were experiments here, genetic ones. It was shut down centuries ago. Jax shivered. That explains the vibes. Feels like the kind of place you find out you were grown in a vat. They walked in silence for a while, navigating jagged terrain and long-dead vegetation. Jax's wound still throbbed, and Saris was clearly limping. Neither wanted to say it, but they were running out of time and options. Eventually, they found shelter inside the remains of what looked like an ancient outpost. Shattered towers of obsidian stone, symbols long faded. Inside, they found an intact control console, barely alive, but Mur's signature flickered in the background. Looks like your creepy AI friend followed us, Jax said. Saris interfaced with it. The console responded and projected a three-dimensional memory feed in the center of the room. Jax froze. The image was of a man, a human. He looked almost exactly like Jax, only older. Beside him stood an alien woman with Saris's eyes. They were laughing, touching, holding hands before a gathered assembly of humans and aliens alike. A ceremony. Saris stepped forward, her voice hoarse. That's not possible. Jax didn't speak. His throat was too dry. The memory continued. Flashes of war, betrayal, a council tearing the Union apart. The final image. The woman being executed. The man screaming her name. The feed shut down. Saris stared at the empty air for a long moment, then turned to him. That was you. No, that... Jax hesitated. That was someone who looks like me. Saris didn't blink. That wasn't just a look-alike. That was an echo. A what now? It's part of our myth. The soul echoes, bonded pairs reborn across generations. We used to believe in them, until science told us to forget. Jax exhaled slowly. So what? We're soulmates from another life? You were the reason the first human-alien alliance formed, she said softly. And maybe the reason it fell apart. Silence. Then Jax chuckled bitterly. Figures. I was hoping for a normal relationship someday. Guess galactic destiny trumps dating apps. Saris didn't laugh. He stepped closer. You okay? No, she admitted. I'm not. I was sent to watch you, report on you, manipulate you if I had to. I figured, Jax said quietly. She looked at him, surprised. You did. You never smiled with your eyes, he said. Not until recently. Saris took a shaky breath. So why didn't you confront me? Because I didn't want to believe it. And because I trusted you anyway. They were quiet again. The tension between them was sharp enough to cut metal. Then Saris did something completely unexpected. She stepped forward and gently placed her hand against his chest, right over his heartbeat. It's the same, she whispered. The same rhythm, as the man in the memory. Jax looked down at her. His voice was barely audible. If you're trying to say we're connected, I already knew. She met his eyes. I don't want to be your mission anymore, he said. I want to be your choice. Her breath caught. Then finally, she kissed him. It wasn't tentative or shy. It was fierce, frustrated, desperate, like two people trying to close 1,000 years of distance in a single breath. When they pulled apart, Jax looked stunned. Okay, he whispered. That wasn't in the mission briefing. Saris's voice trembled just slightly. Nothing about this has been... Outside, a low rumble echoed across the dead valley. Jax's smile faded. Let me guess. Our crazy stalkers tracked us again? Saris nodded grimly. And this time, they brought something worse than soldiers. Jax cracked his neck. Fantastic. The world snapped back into focus with a jolt. Jax gasped, hitting the ground on hands and knees. He blinked at the alien terrain around him. Warped trees with translucent bark. A violet sky streaked with thin ribbons of pale green lightning. The air smelled like ozone and cold stone. Next to him, Saris groaned. Her shoulder was scorched from the blast during their escape. Damn it! Where the hell are we? No clue, Jax muttered, pushing himself upright. But it smells like bad decisions and ionized death. The teleportation portal had spat them out in a different region of the planet, one untouched by the Syndicate War, yet somehow even more ominous. Saris scanned the landscape. We're near the Dead Ridge. This is a no-go zone. Even my people avoid it. Jax raised an eyebrow. Any particular reason, or is it just alien superstition? She didn't answer right away. There were experiments here, genetic ones. It was shut down centuries ago. Jax shivered. That explains the vibes. Feels like the kind of place you find out you were grown in a vat. They walked in silence for a while, navigating jagged terrain and long-dead vegetation. Jax's wound still throbbed, and Saris was clearly limping. Neither wanted to say it, but they were running out of time and options. Eventually, they found shelter inside the remains of what looked like an ancient outpost. Shattered towers of obsidian stone, symbols long faded. Inside, they found an intact control console, barely alive, but Mer's signature flickered in the background. Looks like your creepy AI friend followed us, Jax said. Saris interfaced with it. The console responded and projected a three-dimensional memory feed in the center of the room. Jax froze. The image was of a man, a human. He looked almost exactly like Jax, only older. Beside him stood an alien woman with Saris's eyes. They were laughing, touching, holding hands before a gathered assembly of humans and aliens alike. A ceremony. Saris stepped forward, her voice hoarse. That's not possible. Jax didn't speak. His throat was too dry. The memory continued. Flashes of war, betrayal, a council tearing the Union apart. The final image, the woman being executed, the man screaming her name. The feed shut down. Saris stared at the empty air for a long moment, then turned to him. That was you. No, that... Jax hesitated. That was someone who looks like me. Saris didn't blink. That wasn't just a look-alike. That was an echo. A what now? It's part of our myth. The soul echoes, bonded pairs reborn across generations. We used to believe in them, until science told us to forget. Jax exhaled slowly. So what? We're soulmates from another life? You were the reason the first human-alien alliance formed, she said softly, and maybe the reason it fell apart. Silence. Then Jax chuckled bitterly. Figures. I was hoping for a normal relationship someday. Guess galactic destiny trumps dating apps. Saris didn't laugh. He stepped closer. You okay? No, she admitted. I'm not. I was sent to watch you, report on you, manipulate you if I had to. I figured, Jax said quietly. She looked at him, surprised. You did? You never smiled with your eyes, he said. Not until recently. Saris took a shaky breath. So why didn't you confront me? Because I didn't want to believe it, and because I trusted you anyway. They were quiet again. The tension between them was sharp enough to cut metal. Then Saris did something completely unexpected. She stepped forward and gently placed her hand against his chest, right over his heartbeat. It's the same, she whispered. The same rhythm as the man in the memory. Jax looked down at her. His voice was barely audible. If you're trying to say we're connected, I already knew. She met his eyes. I don't want to be your mission anymore, he said. I want to be your choice. Her breath caught. Then, finally, she kissed him. It wasn't tentative or shy. It was fierce, frustrated, desperate, like two people trying to close 1,000 years of distance in a single breath. When they pulled apart, Jax looked stunned. Okay, he whispered. That wasn't in the mission briefing. Saris's voice trembled just slightly. Nothing about this has been. Outside, a low rumble echoed across the dead valley. Jax's smile faded. Let me guess. Our crazy stalkers tracked us again? Saris nodded grimly. And this time, they brought something worse than soldiers. Jax cracked his neck. Fantastic. The rumble turned into a quake. Dust rained down from the cracked ceiling of the ruined outpost. Jax grabbed his rifle, already checking its charge. Whatever it is, it's big. Saris activated a scan on her gauntlet. Her face paled, a rare thing, considering her copper-tinted skin. What? Jax asked. They're not just soldiers. They brought the Hollowborn. Jax blinked. That sounds friendly. They're not, she said. They're biological shells, grown in labs, fused with dead tech and fragments of ancient Syrian DNA, designed to obey, no soul, no mind, just purpose. Who the hell thinks that's a good idea? People who've run out of morals. Suddenly, a pulse of sound echoed outside, low, guttural, and wrong. Jax peeked through a crack in the wall. There were dozens of them, humanoid, but wrong in every way. Their skin was a patchwork of metal and organic tissue. No eyes, just slits that glowed faintly red. Weapons fused directly into their arms. Saris clenched her fists. They're after the vault knowledge, the MER system, and you. Jax gave her a sideways look. Why do I always end up the most wanted guy in every solar system? Because apparently your DNA is some kind of galactic cheat code. They both crouched as another seismic pulse shook the ground. The Hollowborn were coordinating, scanning, sweeping. Okay, quick plan, Jax whispered. Do we sneak past or go full badass last stand? Saris hesitated. There's a third option. Oh, please tell me it involves not dying. She looked him dead in the eye. You run. I stay behind and hold them off. Jax stared at her like she'd grown a second head. The hell I will. I'm faster alone, she said. You have the coordinates Mer gave us. You can reach the Nexus node, the last AI core. Saris, listen to me, he growled. You ditch me now, I will turn around and walk back into that swarm just to punch you in the ego. Jax, no. You don't get to sacrifice yourself to make up for your past. That's not redemption. That's just suicide with better PR. For a moment, she said nothing. Then her voice softened. You're impossible. Yeah, well, you kissed me. So who's the real reckless one here? A Hollowborn shrieked just outside the building. Jax grabbed a discarded power cell from a dead console and jammed it into his rifle. The weapon glowed angrily. Okay, new plan. We split up just long enough to flank them. That's not a plan. That's a gamble. Life is a gamble. But hey, if we survive, I'll cook you something disgusting and human. Like that. Hot dog you mentioned once? Oh, I've got worse. Jax grinned. Saris rolled her eyes. But the tension between them had shifted, from panic to purpose. They were a team now, a real one. She leaned forward, pressed her forehead to his. If I die, you won't. If I do, she repeated, firmer. I want you to find the Echo Temple. It holds the truth, the full truth. I'd rather find a way for us both to see it, he said. They split, Jax taking the back exit, Saris scaling the broken tower. Outside, the Hollowborn began to converge. Dozens of them, silent, relentless, marching with unnatural grace. Jax moved fast and low, picking off two with sniper rounds laced with ion disruptors. Their bodies twitched violently before collapsing, leaking sparks and some sort of black fluid. Saris, from her vantage, took out their comms array with a plasma spike. A moment later, chaos. The Hollowborn broke formation, just enough for Jax to dash forward and plant a detonation charge. The ground rocked as a section of ridge exploded, burying several of the biomechs. But more came, and fast. Jax ducked behind a slagged vehicle. Okay, Saris, time to vanish. Where's your extraction? North Ledge. 2 minutes. That's longer than I like being alive. One of the Hollowborn, larger than the rest, almost tank-like, turned its gaze toward him. Its chest opened, revealing a cannon of some kind. Ah, shit, Jax muttered. A blast fired, a pulse of green plasma. It shattered the wall beside him and threw him 20 feet across the ground. Pain exploded through his side. His HUD cracked. Jax! Saris's voice crackled in his ear. Jax, respond. I'm fine, he lied. Just airborne and mildly on fire. Before he could move, the Hollowborn leader stomped closer. It loomed over him, arm morphing into a blade. The edge hummed, vibrating at a frequency that promised pain. Jax reached for his rifle. Too far. The blade descended and was stopped by a screaming arc of blue energy. Saris, she landed between them, her gauntlet glowing with Mer's energy, eyes wild with fury. You don't get to take him, she hissed. The Hollowborn swung, but she dodged, countered, and punched through its chest. The thing screeched, collapsed, and died in a hiss of toxic gas. She dropped beside Jax. You okay? Totally worth the concussion, he grinned. God damn, that was hot. She shook her head but helped him up. They limped toward the far ridge, where a hidden skimmer bike flickered into view. Jax looked back once. The ruined battlefield, the broken shells, the dust rising into the violet sky. This isn't over, he said. No, Saris agreed. But we finally know who we are. The skimmer bike tore across the cracked plains, dust clouds billowing behind as violet lightning forked across the sky. Saris gripped the handlebars tight, her expression grim. Jax held on behind her, ribs aching, blood crusting his temple. So, this temple place, what exactly are we walking into? She didn't answer for a moment. Then, a lie, buried under centuries of doctrine. That's vague and extremely comforting. The Echo Temple is one of the last standing structures from the old convergence, back when my people didn't just tolerate humans. We built civilizations together. Jax raised an eyebrow. Wait, you mean, like, actual alliances? I mean interbreeding, co-governance, shared dreams, the kind of unity that scared the hell out of those in power. The skimmer crested a jagged ridge. Below it lay a massive crater. Within it, a structure half buried in time, like an obsidian ribcage rising from the dust. It pulsed faintly, alive despite the ruins. The temple, Saris said softly, still breathing after all this time. They descended slowly. The wind was unnaturally still here, as if sound itself hesitated to exist. The entry was sealed, but as Jax stepped forward, the stone shimmered and opened, as if recognizing him. Saris froze. Only Syrian nobles can trigger the gate. Well, I'm pretty sure I'm just a dirt-poor mercenary with a caffeine problem, Jax muttered. Not if your DNA has resonance, she said. Mer knew. It guided us here. Inside, the walls were covered in luminescent glyphs, glowing a pale blue. The architecture was fluid, like it had been grown rather than built. Jax reached out to touch one and flinched as a surge of memory hit him. He staggered back, breathing hard. I saw people, thousands of years ago, humans, Syrians, standing together, laughing, teaching, living. Saris nodded. The temple remembers. It holds what the high castes tried to erase. They moved deeper into the central chamber. At the heart of the sanctum sat a massive obelisk, crystalline and humming with power. Around it floated 7 smaller shards, spinning slowly in orbit, forming a constellation. Mer, Saris whispered. This is where the original AI awoke. Not from code, but from us. You're telling me AI was born from Syrian and human minds combined? From their union, she said. Not just data, but emotion, understanding, compassion. A voice echoed from the obelisk. both mechanical and human. You return. Echo bearers. Jack stepped back. Nope, 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 nope. Giant talking space rock is where I usually check out. But Saris was still. It's real, she whispered. The Echo AI. The obelisk pulsed, and a holographic memory burst into life. An old vision. A human man and Syrian woman, standing hand in hand before a gathering of both species. They wore ceremonial robes. Behind them, an entire civilization watching. This was the convergence, Saris breathed. And that's, Jax frowned. The man in the vision looked familiar, too familiar. Okay, that guy looks exactly like me. This is getting creepy. It's not a coincidence, the AI said. You are the Echo, the reincarnated imprint of one of the founders. And her? Jax asked, nodding at the vision of the Syrian woman beside him. Saris swallowed. The founder was the daughter of the first high caste. She gave up her title to love a human. You are their echoes, the AI confirmed. This cycle has repeated 3 times in history. Each time, the bond failed. This is the 4th and final. Jax laughed nervously. So no pressure then? The AI's tone darkened. The Hollowborns seek to overwrite the temple. Lord Valsin plans to upload a consciousness override into every living Syrian, to sever empathy, to erase this history for good. Saris's fist clenched. He'll reset us into obedient tools. Unless the bond is fulfilled, the AI continued, your union, both spiritual and physical, will fully awaken the convergence code. Jax blinked. Hold up. Are you seriously saying we have to? Yes, the AI said. You must unite as they once did. Mind, body, and intent. Saris looked away. Her cheeks were flushed with a soft copper red. Jax raised an eyebrow. We've survived 2 ambushes, 3 near deaths, and an exploding bridge. But this is the part where you get shy? She turned to him, fire in her eyes. It's not about sex, Jax. I know, he said, voice softer. It's about choice. They stood in silence, the weight of destiny pressing in. Then Saris reached out, and he took her hand, and the temple responded. The chamber darkened as the constellation of shards above the obelisk spun faster, blue light arcing between them. The temple of echoes seemed to vibrate with something ancient, something alive. Saris stood with her hand still in Jax's. Neither of them spoke, but the air between them crackled like a live wire. Intent confirmed, said the AI's voice. Resonance rising. The central obelisk emitted a low hum, and suddenly, they were no longer in the temple. Instead, they stood in a memoryscape, a vast glowing field beneath a sky of shifting stars. The past surrounded them, not shown, lived. The same human and Syrian couple appeared before them. Their ancestors, perhaps, or echoes of themselves. You're not watching this, said Saris quietly. We're inside it. Jax felt it too, not like a vision, but like a truth buried in his bones. The love, the unity, the terror of losing it all. He turned to Saris. You still trust me? I always did, she whispered. She touched her forehead to his. The memory dissolved. Only warmth remained. Back in the real world, a shockwave burst from the pedestal beneath them. The temple walls shimmered, and every glyph lit up in a cascading chain of blue fire. Above, the constellation aligned perfectly, forming the symbol of the First Union. Far above them, orbiting the atmosphere, Valsin's dreadnought detected the surge. Unacceptable, the high strategist growled. Deploy the Hollowborn now. Wipe them out. Across the wastelands, syndicate dropships roared toward the temple crater. Inside the sanctum, Jax and Saris stood at the heart of a massive energy sphere expanding outward, forming a protective cocoon. Their bodies glowed faintly, veins threaded with golden light. Jax looked down at his hands. What the hell is happening to me? You're changing, Sarah said, voice full of wonder. Or maybe remembering who you were always meant to be. The AI's voice returned. Genetic resonance complete. Echo bond active. Defensive protocols unlocked. Panels along the temple walls opened, revealing a fleet of guardian constructs. Ancient war forms long dormant, their eyes lit with blue flame. You may command them, the AI said. Jax turned to Saris, incredulous. I'm in charge of those things? She grinned. Try not to crash them like your bike. Moments later, the dropships descended, but instead of a stealthy infiltration, they were met with a barrage of ancient artillery erupting from the crater walls. Fire streaked the sky. The hollow-born troops, biomechanical, soulless Syrian drones, landed and advanced without hesitation. Saris jumped into the front lines, her body still glowing, her blade an extension of her soul. Jax stood at the temple's core, flanked by constructs, shouting commands. Protect the Echo. No one gets through. But as the battle raged, a shape descended from above, sleek, armored, deadly, Valsin. The high strategist landed hard enough to crack the stone, cloak whipping behind him. His skin was metallic gray, but the eyes burned red with something artificial. He looked at Saris and Jax. So the traitor and the throwback think love can beat design. He raised one hand. Let me show you what evolution looks like. The ground exploded beneath Jax. He was thrown backward, barely rolling away from a blade of solid light. Saris intercepted Valsin mid-strike. Their weapons clashed. Alien steel versus raw ancestral tech. I was your student once, she hissed, parrying another strike. And I once believed you had potential, Valsin sneered, before you chose weakness. Jack struggled to his feet, blood in his mouth. You call this weakness? He growled, raising his hand. The shard of echo embedded in his chest pulsed, and a blast of energy shot toward Valsin, knocking the strategist off balance. Now, Saris shouted. Together, they charged. The duel was blinding, a mixture of swordplay, psychic force, and pure kinetic fury. At the final moment, Jax and Saris joined hands. The energy between them surged, and a wave of golden light erupted, vaporizing the hollowborn and overloading Valsin's neural implants. He collapsed to his knees, smoke rising from his frame. The red glow in his eyes flickered out. Silence. The AI's voice returned, cycle reset, echo complete, communion reestablished. Above the crater, the clouds began to part. The purple sky lightened. Far in orbit, the remaining syndicate forces powered down. They had felt it. All of them. Not defeat, but truth. In the aftermath, Jax and Sarah stood at the edge of the crater. The temple behind them pulsed gently. The glyphs had changed, now telling a new story, one where love wasn't the end of the world, but the beginning of it. I still smell like sweat and blood, Jax muttered. But if that didn't make you run, I guess you're stuck with me. Sarah smiled and leaned against his shoulder. Good. I hate running. And together, beneath the newly clearing sky, they watched the sun rise over a world that might finally remember what it was like to hope. The Temple of Echoes lay in a state of glowing calm. The battle was over. The Hollowborn were scattered ruins across the plains, and the Syndicate warships had withdrawn silently from orbit. No orders, no purpose. Their command hierarchy shattered. Above the crater, the sky had softened into hues of deep violet and dawn-touched gold. For the first time in living memory, the winds didn't scream, they whispered. Inside the temple's heart, Jax lay unconscious, the energy blast from their final attack having drained him almost entirely. Saris knelt beside him, cradling his head in her lap, her own wounds ignored. Jax, she whispered, brushing a hand through his damp, sweat-matted hair. You idiot, brave, reckless idiot. A soft voice hummed to life. Vital signs stabilized. Echo resonance intact. Subject will recover. It was the AI, Mer, still alive, still watching. Saris let out a breath, trembling. He saved you, Mer added. And you saved him. The communion is complete. 2 days later, Jax awoke to the soft scent of flowers he'd never smelled before. Alien blossoms sprouting from cracks in the temple stone, now somehow blooming again. He groaned, blinked, and the first thing he saw was Saris asleep on the floor beside him, arms crossed over her chest, legs tangled in some alien blanket. "I'd die and wake up to you drooling on yourself," he murmured. She stirred, blinked, met his eyes, then smacked him in the chest. "Don't do that again!" "I'll try." He winced. "Can I get a kiss instead of attempted murder?" She leaned forward, kissed him, slowly, deeply, not out of desperation, not out of relief, but because they finally could. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The syndicate fractured. Without Valsin's control, many of the Hollowborn deactivated entirely. Others, slowly reawakening to their original Syrian minds, began returning to scattered enclaves in the ruins. Messages came from Earth, from Syrian factions, from deep colonies long silent. Everyone had felt the awakening, not in their ears, in their bones. The echo had resonated across time and distance, like a ripple across the fabric of forgotten history. One thing was clear. A door had reopened. Atop a high plateau, overlooking the broken horizon, a new council gathered. Humans, Syrians, even some former syndicate defectors, now reprogrammed and choosing peace. And at the center stood Jax, now wearing a dark ceremonial coat, still scratched up, still sarcastic, but carrying a weight behind his grin. Beside him, Saris, dressed in dark red Syrian robes stitched with gold threads. The crest of her long, hidden royal bloodline displayed openly now. They faced the gathered crowd. Jax cleared his throat. "I'm not a politician," he began. "I'm just a guy who used to deliver fuel cells and mouth off to people with guns. And then I met a sword-swinging alien with trust issues and nice cheekbones." Laughter rippled. "But I also saw something," he continued, "something inside the temple, inside myself, inside her." He looked at Saris. "We're not enemies. We were never supposed to be. Our species fought because people in power chose fear. But we remembered something older, something better." He turned to the crowd. The communion wasn't mythology, it was memory. Cheers erupted, not just from humans, but from Syrians too. They were ready. Saris stepped forward next, her voice calm, measured. "For too long, the castes, the councils, the syndicates taught us that humans were beneath us. But I've seen the truth, and I've bled beside it, fallen in love with it." Her voice trembled slightly. "Jax Frost is not beneath anyone. He is my equal. And more than that, he is my bond." Gasps, audible, stunned. Not everyone had seen the full echo yet. But when she said it, the sky shifted color again, as if the planet itself acknowledged the vow. 1 year later, the plateau is now a vibrant green, life returning to the once wasted world. Reclamation colonies dot the horizon, full of both species working together. The vault has become a center of shared learning. Its AI now open-sourced and integrated with both human and Syrian technology, ushering in a new renaissance. In orbit, a ship launches, its emblem a double helix wrapped around a star. Inside it, the first joint exploration crew. 2 humans, 2 Syrians, 1 hybrid. And in a quiet chamber below the plateau, Jax and Saris stand side by side, overlooking the land that once tried to kill them. She reaches for his hand. "You still smell like a mercenary," she murmurs, "and you still snore like a war golem." He fires back. They smile, and far beneath them, the keystone pulses one last time, not as a weapon, but as a beacon, a signal across the stars. The message is clear. We remembered. We returned. We begin again.